Hello, my name is Kurt, and today I just want to give you a brief introduction to this open source project I'm trying to put together. So the base idea is to bring GraphQL and Graphene, because this is in Python, as you can see, to microservices and try and connect the two as best as possible. You can see over here on the left, I have a request, right? And what I think is pretty cool about it and how I've set this up, and I've only just started scratching the surface. This open source project, which I will link to, only does queries right now. We're hoping to get to, we're still trying to clean up queries, but for now, just queries. We're going to get into mutations, all that stuff eventually. So a quick little rundown of what actually happens. You can obviously see here that this looks like a pretty standard GraphQL query, and the whole point of this project is to make the queries look identical. But what's actually happening under the hood is this agreements field or table, however you want to reference it, is a separate microservice. This token that you're passing in is heading off to a separate microservice from that agreements to be authenticated. And even inside your query, company and product, so these two together are its own microservice. Now, this can be very useful because of microservices in general. All the same benefits you're going to get with microservices, you're going to be able to use GraphQL to harness that power. At least that's the vision. And one added benefit that I think would be pretty cool down the line, not quite yet, is to make queries outside your main ecosystem. Maybe you want to be able to query the weather with your actual database queries. You know, you can do outside APIs. I know they're not GraphQL, but with some internal work, we can get those working. Anyways, so basically right off the bat here, you want the agreements, you want things inside the agreements, you have this token. So what's happening internally, you can head over to the right here, and you'll see that everything looks pretty standard. This stuff, you know, resolvers for everything. You have different resolvers for different things. And this is the resolver we're going to focus on right here, all this code right now. Now again, this is super like alpha, pre-alpha, whatever you want to call it. It's not done yet. There's still tweaks. Naming conventions could very well change, but in this given example, selection set is one of the things that we've created, my friend and I. And selection, again, another, oh, this was just in here for an example. Sorry, I'll get rid of that. So on the screen, as you're seeing it right now, there's three things that we've put together, or we've created. Selection set, selection, and extending normal object types with something we're calling from service. So I'll just give you a brief overview of what's going on here. Just want you guys up to speed, because I just want to kind of make a video or a series, whatever you want to call it, of just sort of like just hashing this out, figuring shit out, and having you guys come along for the ride. So you can see here the query. This is like a custom query. So this is essentially going to do that initial verification of that authentication token. So you pass in your token, right over here on the left. You're passing in your token into agreements. Agreements itself doesn't take a token, right? It needs a user ID. It needs to know what user. Okay, hey, like I don't care about the token. I don't take that in, but give me a user ID to reference. But we still need to know that this guy's legit. So the user microservice is going to take care of that for us. So we have a selection set. Again, these naming conventions probably will change, and I'm not sure if I've already mentioned it, but I will leave a link in the description to the project if you want to come help out or check it out or whatever. This is my first open source project. Anyways, besides that, so you got your selection set. That's what we're calling it. The main encapsulation of a custom query internally that you want to make. So your selection set will be followed up and will contain many selections. I put that in air quotes, selections. You know, those selections can have selections, and it can just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. So you'll see here, and I'll actually come over here and write it out for you guys, what this would look like internally. But the first thing in this selection is what that field is. So in this case, the first selection is a user. So what we'd translate that over to is user, right? Now the second thing is going to always be, I'm going to delete this because that was from when I was testing this all out. The second field is going to be a dictionary, as you can see. Now this can be as long as you want. I only have one value in here because all I need is a token in the user. But the user needs a token to know who this person is. So what I'm saying here is, okay, let's pass in a token, right? And then you can input your own token or what have you, right? So token, right? Makes sense. And then, because you can see the next part here is what internal selections for that selection would you like, or what fields do you want inside of that field? And this can go infinitely deep as much as you want, right? So we're saying, okay, we want an ID. So what we're saying right now is just, I want an ID. Now, let's say you want to add something to that, and I want to have another selection, right? Well, let me just bring that down. Right, you got ID. Maybe I want their name, right? I want their name. Cool. So what am I saying now? Now I'm just saying, oh, whoopsies. ID. Okay, why is it showing that? I don't know. Gets kind of annoying sometimes. But anyways, name. So now that's what's going on here is ID with no parameters, or no arguments, sorry. An ID with no arguments and nothing inside of it. Great. Now I also want underneath that a name. No arguments, no parameters. Okay, let's say there's something inside of name. Maybe name is some sort of placeholder, and internally we have like, you know, you want a type, right? Full name. If you pass that in, you get a full name. Cool. And then inside of there, so what would first? Let's just write this out. All of a sudden, you'd have an argument. Okay, so now you have an argument of type. Right, so you can see how we're essentially making objects of GraphQL. And then we want the full name. Cool. Now obviously there's going to have to now be things inside there. So you take that, boom, add another selection if you so want to. I'm just going to copy this over. Okay. Maybe it's, I don't know, what are we going to call this? Value. Who cares? Anyways, so you can see how now this is what we've done. We've done this query. This is represented now in our built-in sort of thing, like this. You have your selection set, which just sits on top of everything. Honestly, not sure I like this, because if you look at the back-end code, this isn't really doing too much. This could just be one huge selection, and you know, they all kind of act the same. I might just not have a selection set and everything be selections, but we can get to that and hashing it out later. But for now, this is generally how it works. All I actually need is the ID, so I can erase that, and you can see how it's, let's see, I don't want to fuck this up, pardon my French, but ID. So yeah, that's all I need. So in the quargs is where I'm going to get my token, right? If I print quargs, right, you'll see down in here. When I make this, I'll get rid of that. When I make this query, how long has this been going on now? Does it say? 9 minutes, holy shit. Okay. You can see I get the token in. You can see I get the token in the quargs. Great. gets passed into here, right here, token, right? And I'm querying over to the user. Now, inside the user, I've actually overwritten the meta as you may know it, and I'm just going to show you. Inside the user, right? Name is going to be the field name. This is a bit of a hack so far. Haven't gotten around to it, but this is actually important just because you need to specify the table in the return value, right? You know how you get a return. When you make a request, you get like a dictionary that'll say like query and then the table. So this is for that. I'm not super happy with that right now because this does technically, it's used for something else, and I'm gonna make a separate field in meta. Maybe it's like table name or something along those lines. But this is what is added in after the fact. URL. This is not standard with Graphene. I've extended the meta internally and or externally, but in our library, internally in our library, I've extended meta to allow for URL. So this is just internally. So on my local local machine, my environment, it's just going to be my local IP address and the port. But I've set it up with environments just so it's easier when I export out later. But I mean, this one downside, you gotta now, because the model for this object is not in this not in this service, I can't just call the model. I need to now say what's in the model. Not necessarily the worst thing, because here I can just say, okay, you know what, like as you can see, just for testing purposes, I have the password available to be queried, but I can just easily, boom, now password can't be returned. It's very explicit, and I mean, you are kind of repeating yourself, not exactly following the dry principle, but from microservice to microservices, I mean, in my opinion, this is as best as I can get. I thought about having an initial request that'll send out just to get values and then return them in their format or in their different types of form, like if it's a string, ID, boolean, blah blah blah. But I'm still up in the air about that. Not sure it's worth that extra request. You may have noticed that we're importing from request object. This is another thing from our custom library. It's a pure extension off of object type. Just adds in that class method you saw earlier. So this is all it adds in. Well, it does a few other things, but it adds this from service class method. So this is a class method that I'm now attaching to user object. So user object imports request object type, which is our custom extension for Graphene's object type, and we implement that from service. Basically what it does, it takes, so you can see how we have this URL here. Basically what it's doing is it's taking that the custom selection we've made, and I know you see this other stuff here, and I want you to just not worry about that for now, because I'm in the middle of refactoring code. It used to look like this and I didn't like it, and now I've trying to build it out like this and seeing how I feel about it. But so just ignore this for now. But we're extending it, this class method, which is essentially taking your code that you want to make that query to. It knows internally, okay, hey, you've set a URL for me, so I know where to go and grab this information, and then it basically just fills it all in for you. It says, okay, I know the URL because you've set it. Each object has to have a URL, right? And then it goes, okay, I need this table, or I need this first selection, so I'm going to query user. I have arguments token, and I want the ID, and it'll return that to you. So now user has an ID. So now you have an ID in your chain here, and you can just now pass that back. So if you imagine you're starting off in root, you've gone over to the authentication, you said, hey, this is the token. Is this legit? And if it is legit, please give me back the user ID in this case only. And I want to use that. So I get the user ID back, and then boom, now I can go over to the agreements like, hey guys, I know who I am, here's my ID, and give me my agreement. So now you've passed that in, and we start off in the root, go to user, back to root. Root says, cool, we have the ID. Hey, agreements. Shoots over to the agreements microservice, shows them the ID. Okay, give me what the agreement is. Boom, agreements shoots it back, says, hey, here's the agreement for this guy. Okay, so I have it, and all the similar principles are being applied here. Again, there's some conventions that I'm going to be working on, but just get the basic concept. And so we've built the agreement object that we're returning in this resolver based on the parameters you're passing in and this token. So I think that's going to do it for this video. I want to explain it further a little bit more in detail, and then I'm just going to be having videos of just hashing it out, trying to figure it out. If you guys have any input, please feel free, comment. You know, hopefully you guys can subscribe. I will leave a link in the description to the actual GitHub page if you guys want to be part of it. More than welcome. Anyways, take care.